Amy Coney, we'll be saying this name a lot, I'm sure, because she's a fucking nut. Religion. I was right about that one, too. Amy, sorry, but Amy Coney Barrett, Catholic, really Catholic. I mean really, really Catholic, like speaking in tongues.
That was Bill Maher talking about Supreme Court nominee Amy Coney Barrett. Now, if you don't know who Bill Maher is, he's the host of Real Time with Bill Maher on HBO. It's kind of a political comedy show. Very, very liberal, very left-wing. He hosts a show. He has 3 guests on the show. 2 of the guests are liberal, one's conservative. Everybody gangs up on him. The whole audience is liberal. It's just an avalanche of liberalism. Amy Coney Barrett. She's a woman. She has the whole pedigree, the whole package of what's probably going to be necessary to be a Supreme Court nominee. She's worked for Justice Antonin Scalia in the past. She has adopted 2 kids from Haiti. She has 7 children in all. Her husband's also an attorney. She's probably the total package. So what does Hollywood or people really like Bill Maher go after? They're going to go after her religion. So Bill Maher is not ashamed to tell you that he's an atheist. Not only is he an atheist, he pretty much believes all Christians are the way that he described Amy Coney Barrett. We're all flipping nuts. He specifically targeted the fact that she speaks in tongues. I don't know if she really speaks in tongues or if he was just saying she's crazy enough to speak in tongues. I don't know that Catholics do speak in tongues. I know a lot of evangelicals speak in tongues. Some people in my church speak in tongues. Is speaking in tongues unbiblical? No, actually it's not. Paul, the Apostle Paul, dedicates a whole chapter to it in 1 Corinthians chapter 14, where he says, look, if you had a spiritual ability, I would rather you prophesy than speak in tongues, because speaking in tongues edifies only the individual, whereas prophesying edifies the whole church. However, he does say, look, it's great if you speak in tongues, but if you do speak in tongues, you need to have an interpreter. Why do you need to have an interpreter? Because if a non-believer or someone who doesn't know anything about speaking in tongues walks up in your church and the whole congregation is speaking in some exotic language, they're all going to think you're raving lunatics. That's what Paul says. And yes, it's true. If you did walk into a church and everybody was speaking in tongues, we would look all like raving lunatics. The person would look at us like raving lunatics. That's kind of what Bill Maher is talking about. But that's not the point. One, what he said is tremendously rude, but that's the day and age we live in. And he's allegedly a comedian. I say allegedly because his comedy isn't really that good. Although I do like Bill Maher somewhat because he does often accuse or call out members of his own party. However, what we see from him is just a more obvious attack on Christianity that many in Hollywood seem to privately hold. Case in point, look how ministers, preachers, priests, whatever, are portrayed in movies. Typically, if you see a Christian leader in a movie, he's always got the white collar. But if he's not a Catholic priest, then he's probably some southern crazy preacher. For example, Netflix's new special, The Devil All the Time, features some crazy religious people. For instance, this guy.
Behold! The Lord looks out for me now! Amen!
Yes, he was saying that God had cured him of his fear of spiders, so in his sermons he dumps spiders all over his face. Fun fact, that's Dudley Dursley from the Harry Potter movies. Or, what about the preacher from There Will Be Blood?
I said, I have fish. I will bash you now. Get out of here, Get out of here,
Yes, that was him casting a demon or a ghost out of an older woman. Then there's the greedy, corrupt clergyman from a classic Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves.
Oh, you sold your soul to Satan, your grace. You accused innocent men of witchcraft and let them die. Brother Friar, you would not strike a fellow man of the cloth.
And then, of course, there's the corrupt priest who works at the Vatican from Dan Brown's. We all know Dan Brown from the Da Vinci Code, from his book, Angels and Demons.
Father, into thy hands I commend my spirit.
So pretty much everywhere you look, Christians are portrayed as hypocrites, as frauds, as corrupt. It's actually quite remarkable. When's the last time you saw a movie that wasn't produced by a Christian company? I'm not talking about like the Fireproofs of the world. I'm talking about a mainstream Hollywood movie where Christians are portrayed in a positive light, where they're not trying to take advantage of somebody, where the Christian isn't actually a pedophile in disguise, where they aren't trying to fleece somebody out of money. When's the last time you saw good Christians just out there helping in the community? It's rare, isn't it? Now, yes, we had the mega success of Passion of the Christ, which Mel Gibson had to put up a lot of his own money for, and it somewhat hurt Jim Caviezel's career. But being a Christian in Hollywood is like being a conservative in Hollywood. It's something that you have to keep to yourself. Now, I think it's great. People like Chris Pratt from Guardians of the Galaxy fame have come out and publicly stated their belief in Jesus. Denzel Washington is another one. He's given speeches about staying close to the Lord. I love all that. But those people pretty much kind of have tenure, right? They're at their peak, so they get to say those things. Most Christians in Hollywood don't have that luxury. Mel Gibson is reported to have said to Jim Caviezel at the start of Passion of the Christ, Jim Caviezel, of course, is the person who played Jesus, he said, "You may never work in this town again." Why? Because there's such a stigma, for some reason, surrounding Christianity in Hollywood. I'm not sure what it's about. Maybe they like to be idolized and don't like us looking up to anybody else. Maybe Christianity just convicts them. It convicts their heart. There's a lot of bad things going on in Hollywood. I'm sure a lot of those actors are wonderful people, but many of them worship themselves. They worship each other. And there is a great Jewish influence in Hollywood. A lot of the major movie studios, a lot of the major executives, they're Jewish. Now, I at least appreciate the fact that many of them do believe in God. And they aren't necessarily hostile to Jesus, to Christianity, because I think more and more of them recognize Christians as their brothers and sisters in arms, which is great. However, we do see this overt hostility from, say, stand-up comedians. If you ever watch Joe Rogan's podcast, he's not overtly hostile, but it's clear he had an upbringing, and he mentions nuns sometimes, where he has left the faith and he's not quite agreeable to the belief in God or Christianity. And yet, many of these people would say that aliens are real and that they visited Earth and that they built ancient civilizations. That to them is more plausible than Christianity. So what's the point of all this? The point of all this is Amy Coney Barrett is a Christian. That's all they've got to attack her on. Nothing else. Once upon a time, you would never attack a Christian because whether atheists want to believe it or not, push away the Crusades. That's always thrown in their face. Maybe Amy Coney Barrett will get blamed for the Crusades and the Spanish Inquisition. But typically, we act very morally. We're charitable. Imagine Bill Maher. Imagine Bill Maher. For all your talk and hatred that you spew at religion, imagine if all the good Christians in the world, I'm not just talking about regular believers that believe in Jesus but don't act really Christian. I'm talking about real Christians that love their neighbors, love their enemies, that give to charities, that give their time, Imagine if they stopped showing up. What if the Salvation Army said, you know what, we're tired, we're closing down all our shelters? What if all the Christian hospitals said, we're not helping out the poor anymore? We're not forgiving bills anymore? What if the food shelters, food banks shut down? What if all the Christian aid to other countries suddenly dried up? What happens then? You've got a huge gaping hole in humanity. And what's going to pour through? Plenty of people like you. You have common sense. You do have wisdom. But you're blind. You're blind. And your comedy's bad. Guys, that's all I have. Remember, Amy Coney Barrett, whether you agree with whether someone should be nominated or not in an election year, forget about that for a second. Just focus on the candidate. If you don't agree that someone should be nominated, fine. But don't attack her for wanting to be on the Supreme Court. From what I understand, she's an impeccable candidate. Don't attack her for her Christianity. If you're liberal, and that's all the ammunition you have on her, don't use it. Because that's only going to bring you down. That only diminishes your wisdom. That only diminishes your wisdom, your heart. If she's a good person, just say she's a good person, but I don't think she should be nominated. In Hollywood, get your affairs in order because your ratings are sinking. And guys, let's look forward to, I hear there's a Passion of the Christ sequel on the horizon. Passion of the Christ, the Resurrection. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up, click share, and subscribe so we can get the word out. I love you guys. Have a blessed week.